The St. Mort Show.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of St. Mort Show. I'm here with Mike Armine of the band Rosetta. You guys have a new album coming out in like a month, right?
Yeah. Translation Loss will release Flies the Flame on the 17th, I think. Yeah.
Now, I feel like I was thinking about this when I was waiting for you to come over, and I was like, how the fuck do I even know who Rosetta is? And I think the person to thank for me knowing your band is probably the guys in Hey Hey. Because I think you played a show at Harry Cat's with them once.
Yeah, we did.
And it was a really weird show because it was like you guys in Hey Hey, which like don't sound alike.
Right.
And I think Balboa was on that show, who doesn't sound like you guys.
Wow.
And I think Great Caesar's Ghost was on that show, who was doing like Nothing But Minor Threat covers. So it was like 6 bands that...
I remember that show.
And it was in the middle of the day. It was super weird. Like the show started like 1 in the afternoon and ended at 4 on a Sunday.
Matinee show on a Sunday.
But I remember it was one of those experiences where Rosetta to me was always one of those bands, and I'm sure you've probably experienced this from your own experiences of playing, and even when I would book you guys on chord shows, that even when this local music scene was like all about hardcore, you were not the band for those people. You were for like the higher thinking, like that most people just wanted stuff that they could mosh to and nothing else, and you guys never provided that. And I think that's what drew me to it. Was I was like, this is more spacey, this is more ambient, there's something to be said in this.
We were always looking for an avenue to experiment.
Yeah.
There were things that all 4 of us wanted to do in our other bands that we couldn't do because of like those constraints of like giving the mosh and like the box that hardcore can sometimes be. And so we wanted to do things that were a little more ambient. We wanted to do things that were a little more electronic, and we wanted to do things that were a little more spacey, but we also still wanted to be really fucking loud.
Yeah.
And Rosetta was the avenue for that. But the only avenue for shows that we had
was the local hardcore shows.
Local hardcore stuff, and people were willing to book us. I think because we were
different. I used to love, beyond the music, which I always connected with. Even when I hated all the hardcore that was going on, I always loved Rosetta. And a big part of it, I think, was your old... I don't know if you still do this, but your old stage setup where it was just 4 guys with 2 lights, and it made it look like you were in a spaceship. Like, just the way that the lights were set up just made the space... brought the whole space motif perfectly.
We still tour with those lights. Those lights have not broken.
That's incredible, because that's been like 10 years.
Everything else we've owned has broken, but not those lights. It's been 10 years.
I feel like the day that those lights break, that's when you're just like, band's over.
Yeah,
like, that's
in fact, BJ has tried to get other lights. Like, he tried to make a bigger light show.
Yeah.
He had these big, like, floodlights, and those broke. But those crappy, like, blue and green...
They should get in the liner notes as members of the band.
Those things they're troopers, man. They've been through countless tours. They've been around the country like 3 times. They've been loaded in and out of shows.
When you've gone to other countries, did the lights come with you to other countries? They haven't gone international yet.
They haven't gone international yet. We've dropped them, kicked them, like... You name it; those things have been fucking through it.
One of my favorite performances you guys ever did, though, was Hurricane Katrina happened, and I just started doing chords maybe like 3 or 4 months before that.
Yeah.
And I had messaged you, and it was like 2 days after Hurricane Katrina. I was like, "Hey, we're gonna do a coffee house show."
Oh yeah.
And
that was great.
And you're like, we'll do a coffee house set. Yeah. And it was just like the electric guitar plugged in, but all clean, and you like with a laptop playing audio clips, and it was so awesome. It was so different.
We just recently did that in Beijing.
Nice.
And it went over. We did it with about 5 songs.
I wonder, you should just do like a weird live EP of it or something.
I have this like crazy wet dream of doing like a 10-inch of all that stuff.
Yeah, like the softer side.
The softer side.
You didn't even have any vocals or anything. It was just all instrumental.
No, it's all instrumental. I feel like if I threw vocals over it, it would really ruin the
the vibe
of what they are. So when we just did it in Beijing and they just winged it. Yeah. I mean, honestly, there was no preparation for it, but it came out sounding really awesome. And it's something where I would like to, I think when I get a little bit of money in my savings account, I would like to actually do like something special with that, like a 7-inch series or like
a 10-inch. I honestly think if you did it should actually be live recording, because I feel like if you put that in a studio and you take away that raw feel, it's going to take away something about it. But a small intimate show at you remember that one place in Westchester, the Underground.
The Underground.
Like the Underground would have been the perfect space where you can get like 10 or 15, 20 people down there, and it's just this private show that you record and put out there for the rest of the world to hear later.
Yeah, we did it at a coffee shop in Beijing, and for maybe about 30, 40 people, and our tour managers were afterwards were like, that was the best show of the tour.
Yeah.
There was that was incredible. And it was so minimal. I mean, it really it sounded from where I mean, I'm just behind a computer, right? Like I'm just pressing a button at the right time. But it sounded to my ears very effortless from the three of them. I was like, wow, they're really like...
Well, and that's the benefit of being in a band for 10 years with the same four members.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think people appreciate how rare and impossible that is for so many bands.
Yeah, it really is. Like,
I'm sure you've gone on tour with bands where when you go on tour with them again, there's like 2 new guys that you got to meet, or like I feel like bands don't keep their original members.
I talk to other bands about like how they operate, and I don't understand it. Like we're friends with a few bands where one guy writes all the stuff, he controls all the PR, he writes all the lyrics, and he has other members who just play what he's written.
Yeah,
and I don't understand that.
Yeah, because,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was gonna say, because you feel like you're not really having an input. You're just
a hired gun.
Yeah,
and I find that really strange. Or I find it equally as strange when it's like 2 people. It's like their band.
Yeah.
But with us, it's been our band. It's been 4 people, and it's when we write, it's done democratically. Like someone can actually sit. I mean, I sit back all the time, and I'm like, and I'm not even playing an instrument. Yeah. I'm just like. From the perspective of just a guy who likes loud, heavy music, that's kind of boring. And then they will either tell me I'm an idiot or rework it. And after 10 years, you feel free enough to say that.
Well, and I think that's... I'm trying to remember what book it was I was reading. I've been reading a lot of books about screenplay writing. Listeners of the show know my roommate Jeff is my co-writer on all my scripts and everything that I work on. And there was this I was reading a book, and it was talking about how Walt Disney's brother was the most important person in the entire Disney Corporation.
Okay.
Because Roy Disney was the only one who wasn't afraid to say, no, that's a bad idea.
Yeah.
And he was like, that is the most important thing to have when you're a creative person, is like a bond with someone where they can tell you that's a dumb idea and your feelings aren't hurt by it.
And that's where we're at. Like it's like the longer we get together, the longer we've been together, the more easier it's been to constructively criticize one another. And that's been really important in terms of forging like a healthy relationship.
And that probably wouldn't have worked if Rosetta was your first band. I feel like a lot of it came from being in previous bands and like all coming together and being like, here's the things I didn't like in the previous band, so let's agree to not do this.
Yeah, and that happens socially as well.
Yeah.
Like there are certain like we go on tour with a lot of bands that like party and go crazy, and like we're not about that. Like at the end of the night, we're like, look, we want to go back to our room, we want to read comic books, we want to go to bed, and we want to eat.
And that is the biggest memory I have of booking you guys. Is I've always said like I've booked over 100 bands with Chords for Cure, and there's certain bands that I've always felt like I developed a friendship with, and it's almost always those bands who, after the show, I have a distinct memory of you at a show, literally just sitting at the merch table before your set and after your set, reading a book.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that is to someone like me who's like, I don't drink, I don't do drugs, I don't party, like I'm about my comics and my movies and reading. I was like, that's fucking awesome. And it's like, I hate to use this phrase, but it's like, that's the most punk rock thing you could do, is be at a punk show and be more focused on reading the book that you're really into.
It's funny, like punk is very very insular, right? Like, I was having a conversation with my good friend Mark about this. Like, activism in punk rock only to a certain degree happened for us in the 90s. Activism was only happening within the punk and hardcore scene. So you were an activist talking only to punk and hardcore kids, but you weren't an activist outside of that.
Yeah.
So, like, you can't just be this one thing. You can't only be punk. Like, I want to be an educated punk, so I want to read a book, right? Or I want to, you can't just have one pigeonholed thing that doesn't go outside of punk. Like, we're all in a punk band, but like, we're into other stuff. Like, Dave, you will see Dave reading a book on jiu-jitsu. You will see Matt, going over electronic schematics. You will probably find me now, like, grading papers, like, all behind the merch table. And that's where we're at in life. So we're taking punk ethics outside of punk rock, and we're bringing it into our working lives, and we're bringing our working lives into punk rock in a particular way.
Well, and I remember you guys and Ian from Hey Hey and a handful of other guys being a huge influence on me as a person, because being 18, fresh out of high school, starting a college thing, and there's, we've seen SLC Punk.
Yeah.
There's a whole thing about how, what's his name? The big actor, Jason Segel. Jason Segel's character, how, like, no one thinks that he's really a punk because he doesn't dress it and he doesn't act it. And I remember watching that movie in high school and feeling kind of that way, where I'm like, I'm really into punk music, but, like, I wasn't into partying, and I didn't have tattoos. I don't have anything for it. And I also am not a fighter. Like, that was the whole thing with Jason Segel's character, was a fighter, so that's how he fit in. I'm like, well, where do I fit in this? And then going to my first couple local shows and seeing guys like you and Ian that were, like, totally okay with, like, yeah, we're punks, but we're fucking nerds, too.
Yeah. Was
like, oh, you can be both? That was, like, such an exciting discovery.
You can be both. You can be both.
Like, I can be a punk and I can still read my comics and obsess over horror movies. Like, that was my big connection with Ian was one of those first people I met who knew the same crazy horror movie shit that I knew.
Yeah.
And I talk about that a lot on this show, is there's this awesome moment, especially in college. Sometimes it happens in high school, but it always happens in college, where you meet that person where you're like, oh, you're into this shit too?
Yeah.
And it's like the first time you've ever met someone who's into that thing that you thought was, like, what made you an outsider.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I'm not alone anymore.
It's kind of one of the bummer things that happen on tour, is that people, they come to the merch table and they'll ask you pretty much the same 5 questions, which, it starts a house tour.
Yeah.
And then they go into, like, I love your record. And it's thank you. But the house tour question is like, I hate, like, that is, like, the worst question to ask somebody while they're on tour.
Yeah.
It is, like, the worst question to ask when you're on, like, a tour that you booked yourself that is primarily of, like, basements or something like that, because there's a whole variety of factors involved in that, where if any one of them goes wrong, I mean, you have a shitty 72 hours. It's more important for me for someone to approach us and want to talk about something that's not related to what we do, but maybe something that they know we're interested in. So, like, if someone did, like, I was reading a book once in Europe on the psychology of sound, like, and auditory perception, and someone was just struck up a conversation with me about...
It wasn't called Wired for Sound, was it?
No.
Okay. Because my college professor wrote a book called Wired for Sound about that exact same thing.
It's called This Is Your Brain on Music.
I gotta check that out. I like that type of stuff.
It was fabulous. It was I forget the author, but it's a fantastic book. And I was sitting behind the merch table, and someone was just, what's that book about? And we started up a conversation about it. They brought in what they knew about it, and that's more of a valuable experience for me, because
for the fan, because you're not getting a throwaway, like, you kind of get throwaway answers when you hear the same questions every single day.
Someone's like, how's tour? And I'm 3 weeks into it, I'm like,
This is
it's good. But if someone's like, what are you reading? And I can have a conversation about it, they're now adding to my tour experience.
How many books do you think you take on tour with you? Because I'm sure one book isn't enough.
Believe it or not.
Or do you try to hit bookstores when you can as well?
We will hit bookstores, but it depends. Like, now with like the advent of the iPad, I'll bring anywhere between like 3 and 5 books with me.
Okay.
But the problem that I have is that if you put me in a van with a book, I will be asleep within 20 minutes.
Gotcha.
Like, if I start to if I'm reading and like the lull of the wheels and like I'm just gonna keel over in about 20 minutes. We've been doing a lot of overseas traveling. So on the plane, I'll read for a couple of hours and then fall asleep, wake up, hit the book.
Yeah.
But I can't really read for long periods of time, so I have to like close it, step away from it, you know, walk a couple of laps, talk to some people, get a drink, sit back down, and then get back to the book.
I remember coming home from California one year after Comic-Con. I read the entire book of Clockwork Orange in one flight.
Oh wow! I'm not a marathon reader.
Like I had my iPod died, so I had nothing to listen to. So it's just like, well, here's the focus then.
I love reading, but I'm not a marathon reader. Like after a while, my eyes get real heavy and they hurt, and I'm like, all right, I gotta sit back.
I start to break. Like what I've actually started to do is I'll read a book, and after each chapter, then I'll read a comic, like something that's like less strenuous. That's the word I'm looking for. Where I'm like, okay, well now I'm looking at a little bit more of a visual medium to kind of like grind down a little bit, and then prepare myself to go back to like the pages upon pages of text.
And I find that to be a particularly helpful method as well. I'm in the middle of reading the Void trilogy by Peter F. Hamilton.
Okay.
So it's a monster to get through. I mean, it's about as thick as Dune and about just as intricate. Yeah. You know, I kind of have to break that up, and like I'll go to read a little bit of Hellboy. So the Hellboy, the Descent into Hell just came out, and I'm like, this is amazing.
I've been trying to read Don Quixote, which is like 980 something pages, and after every chapter, which is only for the most part like 5 or 6 pages long, I just finished Preacher today.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Dude.
And now I'm doing Morning Glories. Like, I'm working my way through the book series Morning Glories.
Preacher, that is a awesome graphic novel.
Preacher is an awesome graphic novel that's 9 trades long, and I probably could have been okay if it was 6.
There's
a lot of lot of throwaway
As
issues.
a whole,
that ending was intense.
The ending was intense. That whole series about the whole like side story about the gunman.
Yeah, Arseface or Star. The Saint of Killers.
Yeah,
that's trying to get vengeance on God for killing his wolf.
Good.
Oh, it's so good.
So good.
Well, and thankfully no one had ruined it for me.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to ruin it for anybody listening, but I spent the entire trade, the entire run, not knowing, and this is so rare in any comic, not knowing if it was going to have a happy or sad ending. Yeah. Like, I could see it going either way.
Okay.
And I was like, I love that.
Yeah.
Like how many times you go to a movie where you're just like, well, I know it's going to end okay.
He's going to live?
Yeah, he's going to. They've already announced the sequel, so obviously.
Yeah, that's not a bummer.
That's the worst. When they announce, I mean, obviously, if you're going to see a Marvel movie, they're not going to kill their main characters. But, as awesome as Guardians of the Galaxy was, I really wish they hadn't announced that Guardians of the Galaxy 2 was in the works before the first one had even come out in theaters, because then it's like, whatever tension they try to build, you're just like, well, I mean, he's probably not really dead because they're doing a sequel. And it's like, well, that fucking ruins everything. There's the fun in that. I actually found a videotape years ago, and I don't know where it is, and it drives me nuts, but it's of one of your earlier bands performing in a living room.
Oh yeah.
In Ridley Park.
Oh yeah. Dude, that was
I think it was Mike McCann used to throw the shows in his grandmom's old house.
Yeah, it was Mikado. Dude, you're talking 14 years ago.
Because you had the 2-singer thing going.
Yeah, that was a weird time in the 90s. The 2-singer thing was really hip. You had bands like All Is Failed doing it. And then you had these other bands pulling the one vocalist that would sing all the time and the one vocalist that would scream all the time, which was different from what All Is Veil was doing, because they were doing just two guys who were brutally going all at it, and then Luke would throw in the occasional melody, and then so we picked that up, and we played in this guy's living room. It was like one of the craziest things.
I gotta try to find that tape,
because I mean, there was like a staircase, and like
that's where the camera. Well, did you ever know Click, Anthony Clicchio? It was his box. He had a box of tapes from all the old shows, because he was friends with the kid whose house it was, and literally the camera is shot through the railings of the staircase. Like, it's an aerial view that you can see the railing and everything.
Those are the, like,
he had videos of Cameron's old house, the white box, I think they called it.
See, I miss one of the things that bums me out about where we are currently is like when we were young, and when Rosetta was a young band, we were like, and this is personal to me. Like, I'm going to speak for myself here. I don't know if my band members feel the same way, but when I was going to shows in the 90s, before I was even in a band, I wanted to, well, this is it. Like, playing Stalag 13 and the Kill Time, like, this is the pinnacle of what a hardcore band does. Like, you're on tour, you're playing these like shitty warehouse spaces. This must be awesome. Yeah. And I wanted Rosetta to play packed places like Stalag and the Kill Time across the freaking country. Yeah. And the world, if we could.
I mean, you're talking about at a time when the Ataris purposely booked like a 2-week tour only in Pennsylvania, playing fire halls. Right.
But where we are now is not there. Yeah. Like, we can't play basements in West Philly anymore. We can't play small, all ages shows in places these days because of a variety of reasons. Like, one, it's not economically feasible. It's not going to work out for us. Yeah. Two, one too many. I'm not trying to toot our horn, but one too many people might show up, and that causes a problem. And three, like, we're worried about different things. Like, it's not like when you're playing those all ages shows in these odd warehouse spaces or somebody's living room, like, you're worried about two things: having a good time and getting people to talk about your band so that more people come the next time you play. Yeah. Now that we're like, in our 30s and we're still doing this, it's like, all right, how are we going to have a good time, but how are we also going to not lose money on the night? Yeah. Like, how are we going to make sure we get gas money, make sure we have a little bit of money to actually have it be just a tad bit profitable? The rest of that stuff will come as it comes. People are going to find out about your band and come to a show through multiple channels these days.
Well, I think that you guys have, it's always been really cool to me whenever I see anybody talk about doom metal. Yeah. And you're like, your band's name is like always one of the first names that pops up. And I get that, like, that little hipster feeling of joy of like,
I knew them first.
I booked them.
I booked them when no one knew about them.
I booked them in church basements.
Right, and we would, and I think that, we would love to play, church. We play the church in Center City all the time, or not all the time, but like we've played in that space. But they've got a sound system that can accommate in there.
Yeah, everything.
And we can't. If you're rolling up to a fire hall and they've got a PA that's just two 12-bys, two speakers. Yeah. Well, you're not going to hear vocals because Matt's guitar cabinet is just going to like completely blow me out, and things aren't going to be as balanced as they would be. So, playing a spot like the Boot and Saddle, we sacrifice it being all ages for a quality sound system that's going to complement what we're doing. Yeah.
Well, that's no good for you either, because as a vocalist, you want to be able to hear yourself, so you keep going louder,
right?
And then you start to strain out your voice.
And I've been on tours where I've blown my voice out doing just that.
Yeah.
So now we're playing venues with better sound systems. Sometimes they're all ages, and sometimes that they are 21 plus, and it's a bummer. We would prefer playing all ages shows, but we have to come to grips with the fact that we're not playing as much anymore, and when we do play, it's gotta sound good.
Yeah.
Because,
and you're at that weird transition, like, because it's, you're kind of stuck in that realm of like you're playing a style of music that's never going to be like, you're never going to sell shows like fucking the Goo Goo Dolls where you can do every show as an all ages show. Certainly either. Not. Like, you have to, like, your style of music really confines you to a certain level, and that certain market is usually 21 plus.
Exactly. And, and we're at a point now where a lot of people that were, had found out about us when they were in high school, like 9th and 10th grade, like they were, Wake Lift era. They're coming to our 21 plus shows now, and they're like, I found out about you guys in high school, and that was 6 years ago.
Yeah, so all those listeners that are like, 16 or 17 right now, they've been around for 10 years. They'll probably be around for that other 5 that you need to go to the 21 plus show.
I mean, there's
no signs of slowing down for Rosetta right now.
Like, we have plans to be around for, I think, a significant period of time. Especially looking at the fact that, we were talking, about a year and a half ago, like, we may have to not do this anymore.
Yeah.
Because we weren't, we were broke.
Yeah.
And then, Dave was man enough to be like, look, if this independent, releasing things independently thing doesn't work out, like, we don't have any other options. Like, we did our best. And he didn't say it quite that way, but and that hurt. I was like, oh fuck.
Yeah.
But he was right. Like, we were broke. We were putting all of our money into it, and all of our personal money into it, and we weren't seeing the return. We were putting money into vans that were breaking down after every other tour. We were going out on a tour and coming home, and we were grossing like $20.
Yeah.
And it's like, we had a great time, but when you start to think about the cost of going on a tour, being away from families, being away from friends, being away from work, it's like that $20 isn't worth it.
Yeah.
Like, when you're in your late 20s, and you're like married, it's like, this isn't worth it for me to be away for a month. When we were all 22, that was like
this is the best
thing.
life. Yeah,
dude, we took money, we threw it in a van, we threw it into the gas, we came back, we got paid back, and we got pizza money. Awesome.
Yeah. But
when you're in your late 20s, early 30s, and you're married and trying to find like a job, that's just not going to cut it. So when we released the Anesthete online, I remember going to bed that night and thinking to myself, one of two things: we're either going to wake up tomorrow morning
and not be a band anymore,
or my life doesn't have to change, and that means that we've not only are able to pay off what we put into the record in terms of recording costs, but we've made money. And
well, more importantly, I think what it all comes down to is you reached people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I had 2 of the members of 5 Iron Frenzy on a couple weeks ago, and I was talking to them about their Kickstarter campaign.
Yeah.
And, the one dude said, we set our goal super low.
Yeah.
Because we thought there's no way. He's like, there's no way we'll ever reach our goal. He goes, and then to reach the goal in 50 minutes.
Yeah.
He's like the amount of, like, emotion to feel like we've been gone for 10 years and that many people still care about us.
Yeah.
Like, he's like, it was one of, he's like, it's right up there with the birth of my kids and my wedding day as like one of those moments of pure bliss.
Yeah.
It's like, that's amazing. Like, I can only imagine like waking up that morning being like, I can still be a band.
Yeah, I was like, oh, word. Sweet. And then you watched as the weeks followed, like, the money still trickling in, and it wasn't about the number.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I could tell you the number that we made on that record to date, but it's about how many people cared enough to get it. And at the Pay What You Wish model, we actually, the number of people that took that record for free, which is totally fine. We are absolutely okay with it. We just want the record to be in somebody's hands. The amount of people who just took the record for free greatly outweighs, to date, the number of people who have actually
thrown some money
our way.
And I've read breakdowns where, like, they say, like, it's really weird because, like, say your goal price was like $5 for it. For, like, every person who takes it for free, there's someone who paid $10 or paid $15. Like, that kind of, like, worked itself out.
I remember there were the first couple weeks after that record was up, people were, there were a couple like $100 donations, a couple like $50 donations, and it was like, you got to be like kidding me. It was
really surreal. Chords for Cure recently, we in the last couple of months, we decided to do a Pay What You Want show. Because we were like, there's not enough people coming. Yeah. People always say they'd come if they could afford it. And even though I don't buy it because it's only a $5 show, times are tough. Yeah. If they want to just show it for free, fine. And everyone was like, you're going to lose so much money. We made the same amount of money. Yeah. Like, we were still pulling in $250 every show, regardless of who was paying and who wasn't. Instead of someone only paying $5 because that was the asking price, we had more people throwing $20 in. We had more, like, it's incredible how giving people can be when it's something that they care about as much as you do.
Yeah, I mean, we just Justin Jackson, who's working on a documentary about Rosetta, he put up an Indiegogo, and he set his goal, and he reached it like a couple of I think like a week before. No. He reached it like a week into, or maybe 2 weeks into. I'll say 2 weeks. 2 weeks into his campaign. And people weren't just giving like $10. They were giving him like $50 to $100. And there was one person that gave him, I think it was like a $750 to like a producer credit.
Jesus.
But like, what that speaks of is, it doesn't speak of someone trying to get something for just themselves. It speaks to a little bit of the fact that that person cares enough about what you did.
Yeah.
And that said a lot. So when these donations come in that are like, $20 for that album, and it's not a tangible object. Yeah. It's MP3 file, or it's WAV files. It's a bunch of zeros and ones. When someone gives that much money, when they could have just like ordered the vinyl for that much, that money goes directly to us. It speaks to us like, wow, like what we do matters to somebody that's not us. So it gives us like that, it motivates us that much more to like not only keep with the independent model, but to stay as authentic as possible. So for example, we just recently found out that there was some kind of error with a distributor, and they took the anesthete and they gave it to a company that then puts that album on Spotify, iTunes, and all this, and they were selling our album, and we got wind of it, and we were like, what's going on? So we emailed Spotify and we asked them politely to take it down, as it was a violation of our copyright. We emailed the company. I did a whole bunch of like backtracking, and I was like, hey, you violated our copyright by putting this up on iTunes and Amazon. Will you please take that down? And after a couple of hours, they got back and they were like, wow, we did. We will take this right down.
Yeah.
And
was it just a miscommunication?
Or
do you think it was no,
I don't think it was I think it was a clerical error. I think someone was like, all right, well, this was put out physically by this label, so it must mean we can upload it.
Gotcha.
Someone was just kind of doing their job and going through the motions, and they put it up. But we felt the need to address it. We felt the need to get it taken down right away, because someone else, for a short period of time, was profiting on that album if anybody bought it. But more specifically, we felt that we weren't kind of holding up our end of the bargain. Like, we told people it would only be available on Bandcamp. We told people that we don't want to support the major music mongols, and therefore our album can't be up there.
Yeah, because it's completely against what you're trying to stand for.
Yeah, like a lot of people are like, wait a minute, your record's on Spotify, like why do you care? Well, I care because that represents something that we're really not all about.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want my album on iTunes because we don't, for the most part, like agree with Apple's policy in terms of how they go about distributing funds to an artist.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's ridiculous that they're, you know, you're going to pay, you know, $1 per song and the artist sees like 10 cents.
Yeah.
Like that's not okay. Like with Bandcamp, I'd rather you take our album for free and enjoy it, or throw us what you think it's worth, and we get 90%.
You get like 90%.
90%. And on top of that, the more you sell, the less Bandcamp takes.
And you don't feel that bad because you feel like, all right, well, if they're only taking 10%, that 10% is probably mostly going to keep the site running.
Right. And,
you know what I mean? Like,
the,
you don't need 90% of my sale to keep the site running. 10% seems like a very fair...
We'll do. And the great thing about it is, like, I mean, I get in these... Bandcamp as a whole, I will sit back on a Sunday and just, like...
I'll look at stats of the Course for a Cure Bandcamp stuff for hours.
Yeah.
Because I love...
It's fascinating.
The worst thing about having a podcast on iTunes is that I can't see any of my fucking numbers. Yeah. I have no clue who's listening. I don't know how many subscribers I have. Nothing. And then I look at Bandcamp and I'm like, if Bandcamp put together a way that I could put my podcasts on there instead, and I could track who's listening to it and all that stuff,
you could market
it would be
better.
Incredible. Yeah, I could be like... I could actually go up to people with a number, because sometimes when you're talking to someone, they want to know how many subscribers do you have, how many listeners do you have, and I'm like, all I know is that there's 300 people that like the Facebook page, and I get emails about the episodes from like 10 to 15 people.
Yeah.
You know, like, that's the best I can give you. I know that when the episode's on Geekscape, on average, it gets like 30 or 40 Facebook likes, but it's like those aren't like concrete numbers.
Right.
And you have to factor in also those 30 or 40 Facebook likes probably means that more than 30 or 40 people are listening to it. Just 30 or 40 people are willing to say, like, I'm going to share this.
Yeah,
like, you know,
and that's the cool thing I think about a site like Bandcamp is that I can get on there, and I just did this the other day. I found
you can see who's sharing it. You can see where they're sharing it.
But you can share it. Yeah. Like, that's the cool thing is that I found these two really good hip-hop records, and they were free. And I was like, this is... And they're super... They were really fantastic albums. I was like, well, I'm going to talk to people about this. I don't have any money, so... The least I can do
is promote them to someone else.
To someone else. So I'm going to take these songs. I'm going to make a post on Facebook like, hey, these are really fantastic records. You should at least give them like 5 minutes of your time.
Yeah.
And then when I find the album at a record store, that's on my list of stuff to buy. Or if I can order it, you know, then
I always feel that commitment.
Yeah,
if I got like a free
committed.
CD,
right?
Like, because I'm not super into the whole pirating thing, and the only exception I ever make for that is when something's fucking out of print.
Yeah,
like if I can't get a copy of it, I'll buy a bootleg DVD. Well, you better believe that the second that like Scream Factory or you know, Anchor Bay or one of those companies actually gets the rights and puts it on DVD, I'm going to get the DVD because I want the better picture. I want the special features.
Exactly.
But if I have no other option to get it in my collection, well then I guess I'll go with whatever bootleggers at a convention. Like, oh, you have this? I can't find it anywhere. Great.
But that's the way of it. Like, you know, the major record labels are, I mean, they're dying slowly, and they know it. Did you see the documentary Download It yet? Oh man, yeah, it's so good, so good. I was a little disappointed with, I think, the way some of it ended up. Yeah, like I don't like the fact that one guy is out there, like one of the founders ends up making Napster. You know, and it's a system of free file sharing. Yeah. But he goes on to make Spotify, where it is a supportive platform for artists, but when it comes down to what our artists kind of need at the end of the day, which is money to pay for things, you're not getting really what you need out of that as an artist, which is one of the reasons why we took it down. So, like, I'm sitting back, I'm like, well, I get it. You're older now. You need to obviously survive in our world. But you've pulled a 180. You've
I was going to say, do you think that it's also that age? Like, I always think of, there's a quote, and I don't necessarily agree with it, but it's a quote that I always hear all the time, which is like, you know, if you're a Republican in your 30s, then you have no heart, and if you're a Democrat in your 40s, you have or like something like, or you're an idiot, or so like, or it's like, you know what I mean? And it's like one of those things where it's like, I'm sure when he was in college making a thing, his thought process was, man, I wish I could get shit for free. Let's set it up. And now he's a dude with bills. He's like, I need to figure out a way to make some money.
Yeah, I'm sure that factored into it.
But no, I get what you're saying. It's a complete reversal of his entire ethic.
It's a reversal of your ethic to a point where I think someone in a position like that has to step back. And this is me being like super like liberal about it. You got to step back, look at what you got, and wonder how you got there.
Yeah,
is his wealth the product of, you know, his hands in the dirt, or is his wealth the product of engineering a system in which case money very quickly flows into to line your pockets?
Yeah,
because it's the bands that are doing the legwork. You've made the platform, and if you know, Rosetta's record finds its way on there inappropriately and it gets a certain amount of plays, well, that's a certain amount of money that we're not seeing, but who is?
Yeah.
And it's the reason, and even for artists who do see money from Spotify, it pales in comparison to what the artist would see if they put it on Bandcamp. You know, like, it's one of the major reasons, like, you know, you won't find a Radiohead record on Spotify.
Yeah.
Because those guys know that independent releases are the way to go.
The only thing that I think is difficult in that realm, and I've had many arguments with people about this before, is like, it's great to look at Louis C.K.
Yeah.
And it's great to look at Radiohead and be like, that's the way to do it. But you have to also sit there and go, yeah, but could Radiohead 20 years ago have made money if that was how they started?
And that's I think the obvious answer there is no.
Yeah,
you know, like, Rosetta wouldn't be where we are if we didn't work with translation loss.
Exactly,
and that's a fact of the matter.
And that's the thing. And that's when I get mad when because the conversation started off where I was saying, like, the issue with the downloads is that, like, you're hurting the big giants, but the people that you're hurting first are the smaller labels.
Right.
And those are the guys who you kind of need. Like, you don't need to go to Universal and Warner Brothers to get your name out there. If you're on someone like a Fueled by Ramen or Asian Man Records and one of those smaller labels, your name's at least getting out to a group of people who go to that label for a certain type of music, and you reach new people. Then after your contract wraps up and you've established a fan base, absolutely, you'd be a fool not to go independent. But I just see it still being really difficult to base it just on, like, I'll put up some videos on YouTube, I'll get a bunch of fans from YouTube, and then I can sell this and make a ton of money.
But even this is true. I mean, what you're saying, it's accurate. But look at, you know, the small label still needs to exist, if anything, to help kind of bring together a culture in a way. Like,
I think that culture has always been made by the small labels.
Take Hydra Head, for example. Like in the 90s, like in the early 2000s, I mean, I was buying any Hydra Head release.
Exactly, and you don't do that for Warner Brothers.
Because you don't do that for Warner because they're a money-making machine.
Yeah.
Hydra Head was putting out records that were diverse, but all had a particular aesthetic in sound that people were looking for. You knew what you were getting without really knowing what it was going to sound
and
like.
And that's a thing that I miss.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I miss about physical CDs. I know a lot of people question why I still buy physical CDs, and it's this element of nostalgia of, I remember, like, discovering Blink-182, or say I discovered Blink-182.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, Blink-182, I like this song, damn it, I buy the album, and you look at the bands that they thanked, and you're like, who's NoFX? Let me check out NoFX. Who's MXPX? Who's, like...
Yeah.
And you go through those liner notes, and then you find those bands, and you like those bands, and go through their liner notes, and you keep finding these more and more obscure bands through that.
Yeah. The smaller labels are have always done a good job of coagulating a group of artists and really pushing them to make it known. And Translation Loss did a really good job of doing that for us and bands like Mouth of the Architect.
The fact that they supported what I think is one of the most ambitious first album releases.
Oh yeah, that was dumb. No label should have ever done that.
No label should have. I remember when you gave me a free copy of that CD because I booked you like 5 times or something like that. Yeah. You're like, take a CD, like here it is. And like a week later, you messaged me on MySpace. That's how long ago it was. And you were like, did you figure out the secret of those CDs yet? And I'm like, no. And you're like, did you upload them on your computer? I'm like, yeah. He's like, look at the lengths of the track 1 on both of them. Like, and I looked at it and it just clicked immediately. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? And I spent 2 days like sitting on GarageBand, like syncing them all up and making it, and it's awesome. It sounds gorgeous.
I mean, that's something. I mean, we ripped that clear out of the Neurosis book.
I was gonna say
that's
that was
Neurosis Drives the Neurot trick.
I was gonna say didn't like the Flaming Lips did that around the same time.
The Flaming Lips did it before them. So I mean, like. It was nothing. It was nothing new. It was just like,
but it was a really ambitious thing for a first band to do.
We might as well do it. We might as well try something crazy. And I would love to get to do more of that, but time is obviously a factor these days.
I do have to ask, when that was written, when you like decided to do that, like so disc 1 is, let's just say disc 1 is the songs, and disc 2 is the backgrounds,
right?
Did you have it written to sound like the two combined, or did you record the songs and then go back to record the background?
Yeah, we recorded all the songs, and then Matt and I went back over
and just were like of playing around with what you could do.
I remember plugging my sampler into his pedal board and just turning knobs and pressing on his like wah pedal, and I just fucked with all.
But the coolest thing is that second album, even if it's just background noise, kind of still is a great just drive like. If I'm like working on a script and I just need some good ambient background noise, it's still an awesome.
I'm really proud of that.
Yeah, like it works as its own record. Yeah. Like
Matt would just play his guitar over it and play bass over it. But it was, I mean that was when I will say that I miss. Actually, right now with the band, there's a ton of bands that I've been booking lately where I'm like, wow, there's a lot of creative bands out there right now. But there was that like. I'm glad you know that because I don't. I'm like,
there was that small group though during like the 2004 to 2006 where it was like you guys and Hey Hey and Make Me and Forever Got Shorter that were doing stuff that was so fucking creative, and I kept getting angry.
No one knew
because it's like there's all these college kids and high school kids who are here to see. You know, I'm not going to throw any specific band names out there, but they're here to see like a bunch of 16 or 17-year-old kids that they're friends with just play sludge metal.
Right.
And then there's like this amazing, artistic, unique sound that's coming out of this other band, and they're outside smoking cigarettes.
But that's been the great thing about, media being on the internet right now. And I'm not a fan of the internet for the most part. I think like 90% of it is garbage. But when you've got bands being able to post entire albums online, you no longer really have to worry about no one knowing, because if there's a big enough push and if the band is good enough, there's a certain level of like social Darwinism in it, in that if the band is really good, through the internet, someone will find you. Like, I was on Bandcamp 2 nights ago and I found this band from Portland, Oregon called Sloths.
Okay.
And I was like, this band fucking rules. A bunch of young kids out of Portland. And I mean, when I say kids, I mean like, they're in their like mid, maybe early 20s. And I'm like, dude, this is fucking great. And they're I've been following them on Facebook and on Twitter, and they're just like, they're playing basements and like living rooms, and they're doing the stuff that I guess I was always under the impression of that Rosetta would be doing forever, and I'd be happy with it, like somehow in my like dream world, like we're playing, shitty warehouse spaces, and we're with fabulous PA systems, and we're getting like $500 a night, and food. I mean, not that that's ever happened to us, but but they're going out and they're doing it, and they would probably be, 2004, 2005, the band that no one is watching, but is probably the most like creative.
My favorite story of any of the shows that I ever threw was, did you ever hear a band from Philly called the March Hare?
No.
Okay, so the March Hare was this 5-piece band, all from UArts.
All right.
And they had a keyboard. All 5 of them sang lead vocals, and they all harmonized with each other. The one dude was a jazz drummer. The other guy played a 6-string bass. One guy had a guitar that had a foot pedal like the size of this table effects. They had a chick that played violin and was the screamer in the band. And then this other guy who had like a double-stacked keyboard and played guitar. And they did like this disco fusion metal funk thing. Like, it was like the craziest sound ever. No one would ever watch them. Do you remember a band called Racing Kites?
No.
Okay, so Racing Kites was just like basically a pop-punk Jonas Brothers.
Okay.
And like 300 kids would come to local shows to see this band play.
Wow.
They were playing Warped Tour, Bamboozle. And I was friends with one of the guitarists because it was Matt Howard from Adelaide, if you remember the Adelaide from forever ago. So I would always book them whenever they were like not on tour and they just wanted to play some shows locally. And March Hare played right before them. Because I was just like, I need people to know who this is. Like, I knew that they did not match sound-wise anyway, but I was like, there's going to be a ton of people there, whatever. And the bassist from Racing Kites almost refused to play because he was so frustrated that the most talented band... He was like, we're not the most talented band on this show. Like, these kids should be watching these guys close out this show. Like, he was so upset. And like, he was like, he's like, do you know how much I would give to be in a band like that instead of this band?
Yeah.
But he's like, but this is the band that pays the bills.
Right.
He's like,
yeah. I mean, that's at the end of the day. I mean, he's in the band that pays the bills. Like that's sadly when you get.
He even made like I thought it was really funny. He made a snarky comment where he was on the show. He's like, he's up there. He's like, so what did you guys all think of the last band? And like everyone cheers. He's like, liars! None of you were watching. Yeah. He's like, you guys need to come to the next show they play and pay attention. Like,
sadly, comments like that. I don't know how I feel about them.
Yeah.
Because like, to a certain degree. Yeah, you're making a good point. Like people,
but you're making the band. You're like accidentally shaming the band.
But you're like shaming. But you're also making people feel guilty about that. Where if they want to come out and watch their friends, I get it, and I'm okay with that. Like I do it all the time.
It's part of what happens with shows.
I mean, look, I'm an old man. Like I'm gonna go to a show on Friday. I'm gonna go see Restorations. I'm going late. And I'm going to watch it because they're great, and I'm going to go home.
I'm going to also justify that sometimes, for me, with my old-ass ears, it sounds clearer and better when I'm standing outside the door. Like, when I have that door that's blocking like all the extra noise, and I can just hear the pure sound of the music, because I don't need to be in a mosh pit anymore. Like, I go to shows and I want to go up to the bar area, not because I drink, but because I don't want to be around.
I can only be on my feet for so long. So it's like,
the first. I try to get to shows as early as possible just to get to the upstairs seating area.
But that's the thing. If you want to go and see your friend's band play and leave, like that's on you because you're going to miss potentially. Like I will potentially miss 2 really good bands on Friday, but I work a job. I really don't want to rush to get from my house to Trenton
for 3 hours. For 3 hours of a band you don't know.
Right. So and there's just I've got my own stuff to take care of at the house. When you're younger and you've got the time, if you're there to watch your friends, well then you're there to watch your friends. You're not there to be exposed to music, and that's when you're younger. That's okay. Like I think that pissed me off when I was in my 20s. But you're allowed to like experiment, and you're allowed to like hang out, and you're allowed to talk to your friends at a show because that's cool. I really it's upsetting me in my like now when people are like, oh, like you're there for scene points or something like that. I'm like, or
I like the band,
or they're there
to experience something.
To experience community, or they're there to talk to friends, or they're there to identify with something greater than greater than whatever else they could be involved in. And
I tell them to
that's
do it because when you're our age, the shows aren't the same.
Yeah.
They don't hold that same magic that they used to. Like, I wish that I was excited, even throwing the shows. I wish I was excited as I was at 18.
Right.
Like, college, that's all I thought about Monday through Thursday was like, oh man, that show Friday night, it's going to be so good, it's going to be so much fun, I'm going to see this person, I'm going to talk to this person who I haven't seen all week, and it was like a reunion every week. And now it's just like, oh, shit.
Well, yeah,
like, got to deal with these kids.
That's the thing. Like,
I mean, that's promoter complaints too. Where you're just like, I got to deal.
It's something that we've got to remember is that to a certain degree, like you are dealing with like kids who are growing up. So like, and I don't mean to demean the kids that are coming out, but like you're dealing with young people. So I used to get upset when I was in like Mikado and early Rosetta when we'd be playing shows and you would observe a group of individuals just hanging out. Yeah. And like they'd be in the parking lot, they'd be at the show, but they weren't actually at the show. Yeah. They were like making out or like doing whatever, smoking cigarettes and making out, which is disgusting, but whatever. As I look at it now, and I'm older, I'm like, well, that's all right, because that's an experience that they had and it was valuable to them at the time. It didn't benefit me for them to do that, but it benefited them, and it's kind of shitty of me
just want to take that away.
To want to take that away from them. Yeah. So now, when I'm at a show, because we will occasionally play like an all Asia show, and that happens, I'm kind of like, good for you.
Yeah, at least
like,
you're having a good time.
Have a good time, man. Because if you spend a lot of time being bitter as a guy in a band about fucking didn't watch me, like that speaks poorly of you.
Yeah.
To feel entitled that just because you may be in a great band, that you're entitled to somebody else's time.
I think that can go with all art. If you're a writer, if you're a comedian, if you're a person who's more focused on being bitter than like the enjoyment of others,
right?
Like you're not really enjoying a good life.
Yeah, I mean,
it's like you're really
go on the First Friday, for example. You'll find a lot of people out there who are not really into art.
Yeah,
and then you'll find like the actual like crazed art heads, there, and there's a particular dynamic that that's kind of odd between the two. Well, it's okay for people who may not be into art to just be wandering around and blending in with that particular world. It's an experience, and they may just see something that they like. They may just have a good time.
As long as they're not being a dick.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, as long as... Like, I have no... There's an awesome article that I read recently that was about, like, shaming girls for going to conventions and saying that they're not real geeks.
Okay.
It's like, who the fuck are we? Like, who are we? Like, unless they're walking around and they're making snide comments about you being into that shit, like, that's one thing. But if a girl, like, is it that bad that a girl's into Doctor Who and she wants to go to a comic book convention and, God forbid, might get introduced to other stuff?
Yeah.
That can open up her...
Exactly.
And that's the thing. Like, there's nothing... There was a quote that my one friend had when we were trying to come up with a tagline for Geekscape, and I still wish that we used this tagline, was that her argument was that too many geek news sites are so snarky that she thought that Geekscape's tagline should just be, it's okay to like stuff.
Yeah, that's it. It's okay, and it's okay to like experience stuff too. So like I'll go to I'll go to I really like hip hop.
I was gonna say when you mentioned that earlier, I was gonna ask you about that because of all the genres of music that a dude in the band Rosetta could be into,
I love like. Not dumb hip hop, like conscious hip hop,
like the Atmosphere, Sage Francis kind of alternative.
Yeah, POS, like the Rhyme Sayer stuff, I think is really nice. But that alternative hip hop, like Aesop Rock, Blueprint is one of my favorites. So I'll go to those shows, and I'll just go to a show like 2-on-5 hip hop will sometimes do a show, and I'll just go, not knowing what to expect, because that's something that I can't really do anymore with heavy music, because I can't spend all my time when I'm at a heavy show, because I'm playing my own shows that are loud and heavy. I kind of want something a little different. It's okay to go out there and get your feet wet and like, be the outlier in the group and just see things. But when you're younger, a lot of people view that as like from the lens of, well, you're not being authentic.
You should have a bunch of local Philly rappers and kind of do like the Jay-Z Linkin Park thing of just get a bunch of local Philly rappers to rap over Rosetta songs.
There was a time where I pulled Matt in the corner and I was like, yo, you know that like real weird noise part with the noise drums? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, what if we got a rapper to rap over that? He's like, no. He was like, that's not a good idea. I was like, but Dalek. He's like, stop.
I would be
right
so.
there.
You have no clue how much. If I was listening to a Rosetta song and a rapper made a cameo in the middle of it, my mind would be blown. I'd be like, "This is the greatest song they've ever written."
Dude, it would go over so well. He's like, no.
I got to play you some fucking Roots in stereo before you leave,
please. And he, yeah. So bringing those kinds of things into your life is all right. So I don't really get when people are like, I really don't like this kind of music, but my boyfriend over here like turned me on to you, or my girlfriend turned me on to you. I view that those people are being authentic. That they're not there to just like suck my dick and like shake my hand and feel and like and try and like act as if they were into it.
Yeah.
I take it from a standpoint of like, I'm really happy that you found something new and that you found enjoyment in it. If you can take that and you can apply it to going to a record store, or even just sitting on your computer and going to Bandcamp and just like
searching out that style,
just working on a paper, working on whatever, and just pressing play on stuff that looks cool, taking that chance instead of getting into the rut that people can just fall into of like, I only like these 5 hardcore bands and that's all I'm going to listen to. There's tons of shit out there, and you'd be dumb not to experiment.
I mean,
listen.
Too much of the same thing is just boring. Period. Yeah. Like I mean, every genre of music I like, I need to change it up once in a while. Like I can't listen to folk music all day. I got to change it up with a little something heavier. I can't listen to rap all day. I've got to, I love driving. Trust me, when my job involves me driving around as much as it does, there's nothing better than throwing on like an old Beastie Boys CD or a Run DMC record. But eventually, I need to put something else on or throw on a podcast.
Like we no longer live in like there was a time, pre-internet. For those of your listeners that remember those days, where like sounds were regional, right?
Yeah.
So you had like a Florida Gainesville sound. You had Philadelphia had its own sound in terms of hardcore. Chicago had Failure and Hum. Florida had Army of Punch. Hot Water Music, which you can kind of hear that influence in City of Ships as it came later. LA had a sound. Portland, Oregon had a sound. Portland, Maine had a really interesting doom sound that came like in the early part of 2000s.
I would even say New Brunswick, like 2 hours from us, New Brunswick, Jersey had a very...
Jersey had its own sound.
Jersey had 3 or 4 different areas of Jersey that had its own sounds.
And all of that, but now with the advent of the internet, like you no longer have that divide. So now, like, you're getting sounds from Portland, Oregon, influencing sounds in like Greensboro, North Carolina,
which is
influencing
awesome.
Sounds in Texas, and it's amazing that kind of interaction can happen now. The cool thing for the listener is that the listener now can jump into a variety of rabbit holes and kind of
hear what someone else is doing that you never would have thought of,
and hear a bunch of fresh things and have something cool to talk about. The issue, then there's no issue with that obviously, but like the thing that arises is, what does that mean for the small label? Because that's not, you're no longer buying into a label brand like Hydra Head or Translation Loss. You're just simply being an active consumer of independent music, and that is, to me, extremely refreshing on a variety of levels.
It kind of makes me think of the documentary American Hardcore, where they talk about how like DC's sound was completely changed when LA bands came and played in DC for the first time. Those days aren't there anymore. You don't have to discover a new sound from a band coming to your town. You can find that sound all on your own.
Right. Like, I mean, there was obviously like Lawrence, Kansas had this insane noise rock sound that we found later in like upstate New York. Why is that? Because there was this, because a band got in their van and they took the sound elsewhere.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, when I do discover a local band, I can hear. I'm like, wow, like there's a little bit of that Chicago sound on the guitar with a little bit of like that like, you know, those gruff Gainesville vocals with a little bit of this from this area, and I'm like, this is interesting that you can hear these influences that aren't just local, they're national,
regional,
and oftentimes like global in a sense. So I found that kind of I found that like kind of amazing. Like I spent a lot of time thinking about that, and where Rosetta like fits in to that kind of thing.
So the new record, when's it coming out?
October 17th.
And the record release show is the same day or the 18th?
The affiliate's the 18th at the Boot and Saddle.
All right.
Yeah.
And where can people check out the right? Is that going to be Bandcamp exclusive as well?
No, that's going to be up on Translation Lost because we owed them one last record for our contract. There is a teaser video up on YouTube. If you just type in Rosetta Flies the Flame, that should come up. Or you can, if you go to rosettaband.com, there's an active link to that video there. There's a couple interviews floating around, but yeah. So we'll be. I don't think we're touring the States this year. I think we're going back to Europe, but
all right.
I don't know what, who knows what offers will come across our table.
Nice.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
No problem.